really excited by the title and by what I thought we would be grappling with, crafting the UK artisan silversmith. This made me think, yes, this is going to be, we're going to be looking at really where the craft should be going, or what sort of directions we think it should be heading in order to still be valid and vibrant in the years to come. And I felt we touched on some of those issues, but then I felt we kept on sort of backing away from them. So I think that there was much more on where we are and much less on where we ought to be going. And of course, this is very tricky stuff because it's almost saying we need a crystal ball to see, you know, where the market's going to be and so forth in years to come. But I don't know if many of you, or indeed all of you perhaps, have been to see the Silver Speaks exhibition installation at the V&A. And I thought that there were some marvellous things in that show, really, really strong, powerful things. And there were also some things where I thought, what the hell is this object about? It seems to have the form of a piece that is meant to be used, and yet it doesn't seem to lend itself to that. It seems to be making an artistic statement, and yet it's actually just, it's a statement that makes the object neither beautiful nor necessarily usable. So I think it's a sense of direction that perhaps is possibly missing amongst some practitioners nowadays. And I think that's a bit tied up with this area we touched on about terminology. Are we artists? I say we. I mean, are silver working practitioners, are they artists at one end of the spectrum, or are they silversmiths at the other end of the spectrum? One is a sort of mechanistic statement of fact, they work in this metal. The other is a sort of aspiration. Well, I want to create something that is beyond utility. And I think, you know, we shouldn't necessarily think we have to be beyond utility. And then the other thing that I started to think about today, particularly when Richard was describing the role of the Goldsmiths Company, I mean, there's no doubt that the role of the Goldsmiths Company over the last 30 years has been absolutely critical to the thrivingness, that's a rather poor word, isn't it? The state of the art and the industry in this country. And it's been 100% entirely benevolent and useful, to use an extremely minimal word. But it's also been directive. And I think if one can generalize, probably always dangerous, but to generalize, I think that the model that the Goldsmiths Company's patronage and support has encouraged has been more towards the artist craftsman than necessarily towards certain other possible models of this industry. And is the artist craftsman the only model? I mean, I think we live in a golden age in terms of the creativity and skills of our practitioners, but when you have somebody working essentially by themselves, what tends to happen is they become better and better, more and more skilled at perhaps rather a narrow range of work. And as a result, you can, from the other end of the room, you can spot, oh yes, that's I won't mention any names, but that's definitely work by artist A, that's by artist B, that's by artist C. And if you know your stuff at all, you've been around, you can spot these things. But equally, some people whose work I admire enormously, I also feel that it's heading a little bit down a cul-de-sac. And you think, well, I've seen this artist for the last 20 years. Actually, it doesn't seem to be any different now from what it was 20 years ago. And I feel that may partly be because of the one-man band framework of the operation. So we possibly lost an aspect of making that used to be such a strong element of silversmithing in this country, which was the collaborative project. I mean, if you look at the trade books of the 18th century goldsmith George Wicks, and you look at a tea caddy, and you'll see that it went through 6 different subcontractors to get it into its finished state. Is this maybe something that we have moved excessively away from? Should we be coming back towards that for some of our productions? Well, you know, these are questions, but I think maybe we might profit from talking about them a bit, perhaps.